she helped me and actually scared the hell out of me, because she then came up with this idea of saying, well, Imran, what if you met new people every week and you dedicated time to it, like you dedicate to having 2-3 sales meetings per day? You have to meet new humans. And, the underlying thing is that it tests your empathy, it grows your network. And part of it is just about giving. You don't take, you give first. You help without any sort of intention of making money or monetizing it.
Welcome, my friends, to Connect with Confidence. I'm Kerrie Phipps, and I am so happy to be here today with Imran Rehman. No, let me try that again.
Oh, that's correct. That's fine.
That's correct.
Yeah, you can. It goes into a Rehman. It can be quick, or you can say Rahman. It can go upwards as well. So okay. That's what many people say. So it changes depending on the language you're speaking
and the accents that we speak with.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why names are so beautiful.
Yes, and while we're on that, Dale Carnegie said, the sound of a person's name is the most beautiful sound, and it really matters to me that I use people's names correctly. And as I've travelled, I've sometimes encountered names that are so hard to pronounce with my Australian accent, English language. I did learn another language, but it's sign language, and that can be helpful in different places. But it's great if we can get people's names right. So, Imran, I am so happy that you're here, because when we first connected, thank you to Simon Jacobs in the UK. So I think he connected with you on LinkedIn, correct? And you both went,
he did.
Let's have a conversation.
That's how it started. Thank you to him as well from my side.
Yeah. So then you're two guys connecting, from Vienna to London or Manchester. And you have a conversation. And I love that about LinkedIn, that you often can connect with somebody, you look at their profile and you're like, let's have more of a conversation. Let's actually really connect. And so then he said, Kerrie, you've got to meet this guy. So we've had one conversation. Yeah. So we've had one conversation that I just felt like was such a rich experience. So immediately I said, will you please come on the podcast? There's so much that you can share. And rather than, detail your bio that's on LinkedIn, people can go and find that. How would you describe yourself in a nutshell?
I think today what I do is two things. Number one, I accompany people, either as a coach, either a confidant. Sometimes I'm just a sounding board. Sometimes I'm just there to hold space. Nothing more than that. And the other thing I do is I feel we need to create tools of the future, tools that our organization need to be able to create the robust and dynamic structures that will take us into the future. I find currently what we have validates the leadership we have. There are some great leaders out there, but I find we're struggling. I think we are all struggling currently. And I mean that with compassion and with empathy and not pointing fingers. We are conditioned by our structures and systems. The systems are bigger than us, and we are not able to see beyond the fence to see what we need in the future. And that's what I take care of in the company I've currently set up with 2 other co-founders and a great team around me.
That's beautiful.
Called Kokoro.
Sorry?
Called Kokoro, the name, Kokoro, the Japanese term we've taken to name the company.
And so what's the meaning of that Japanese name?
Well, the reason we ended up on that term, you'll see it in restaurant names as well, but in Japan, Kokoro defines not the physical heart, it's the heart something has when the head and mind and spirit is integrated in one. They use one word, and we need a sentence with 2 ands to be able to describe it. So if you want to, let's put it in the sphere of innovation. And in innovation, they have an index in Japan called the Kokoro Innovation Index. And if you have a product, it's matched up against this index to see how much Kokoro it has. How much of it is integrated with the head, the spirit, and the mind of the human.
Wow.
And if that product reaches that, then it is complete. And I like that idea because I find that is exactly what we're not doing in organizations. We're not taking the complete human. We're not allowing the complete human to turn up and be there. I'll take something very, very simple, which is very complex at the same time, is do we really allow people to belong completely in every part of the organization and in every part of their private lives. I think we don't do that well. I think our structures do not serve us. And I find we don't do it well. And when we talk about it, we get all awkward. We find it very difficult.
Yes.
We get all messy.
Yes. Well, I invite you to a messy, awkward conversasation. So Brene Brown has recently been ending her podcast with "Stay awkward, brave and kind." I've seen that on her social media also. And I love that, because in the last 5 years since I've been talking about do talk to strangers, I've noticed that the questions that people ask, they're often fearful of an awkward moment. We just don't want to be awkward. And so I created a hashtag, a year or two back, be okay with awkward.
See, that's it, Kerrie, for me. It's always been the thing. Like people, awkwardness, if you can create the space within seconds, people have no problems with being awkward. The awkwardness comes is when in their head there is a simple sentence. I am currently being defined by somebody else who is judging. That's what happens, isn't it? You can always see a person when they are in a meeting or in a situation on talking to you, and you realize very, very quickly that what's actually happening is they are what others think of them.
Yeah.
And if you catch yourself in that, or if you feel that other people are in that, what can you do to make that person feel, no, you are with yourself and it's okay. And at no one moment will I take any of your words and judge them, but I will try to understand them, empathize with them, be compassionate with them.
Yeah.
And what very often happens is then when enthusiasm or liveliness comes through compassion and empathy, it encompasses the other human and and almost like a magnet pulls them in. But if you're driving your conversation with passion is very dangerous. It hurts. Passion kills. And that's why I'm always very, very careful with team leads or leaders or people in the community. And I really do work on getting to understand that passion is not the thing to drive community forward or a team forward, because you'll run out of energy, firstly, very quickly. Passion should be used sparingly, but it is actually a double-edged sword. One side is very beautiful when we experience it from as an audience and say, wow, look at that passion. Fantastic.
Yeah.
But it's damaging and it can hurt when somebody wants to go in a direction and wants to take the whole organization and team in a direction, and it's done through passion, because it hurts. You'll say things that will hurt people.
Wow. Yeah, so interesting. And can we just go back to the very beginning where you talked about how you hold space for people? Because that's one of those phrases that we can use as a coach. And so if you can just explain, what do you mean by that, and what happens in that space that you're holding for people?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I get asked this question a lot by leaders who are transitioning maybe to the next big role and saying, Imran, I used to have 2 teams. Now I've got a whole business unit. I can't hold that space anymore. And then it starts getting people to start. And I look at them and I go, well, look, where are you struggling with this thought? And one of the things I'm always about is, I think one word you use, I see in everything you use, Kerrie, is the word confidence. And I think we never really explore that word. We use the word confidence very often through a personality diagnostic, or what we think is confident. We confuse it with competence.
Yeah.
Very often, we find very competent people who are not competent, but give them the job. But when we find very competent people who maybe not are confident, and we say, I don't think they'll do well in the organization. So we're confusing a lot of things here. So for me, holding space is always about building the unseen confidence in a space with living bodies. So how do you do that? And I think that is what it's about. It's about creating that confidence. And the confidence hangs in the room. And that confidence is what creates this feeling of flow, that when time suddenly becomes, Imran, we started at 8 this morning and now it's already 5 and I haven't felt the day.
Yeah.
Those are signs. So you can't see it, but like you can sense tension in a room and you can cut it with a scissor.
Yeah.
You cannot sense when space is being held well, because time flies. And it's only afterwards you experience it. It's almost like belonging. Like when you feel included, you cannot know. You don't feel it. You only feel the pain when you're excluded or ostracized from a community.
Yes.
These are the things. So that's what holding space for me is about, that confidence in a room. So people walk in and feel, I can just be complete here. I struggle with the term sometimes, to behold. Because I don't think anybody's ever whole. I think somebody is complete in that time. Because you might have had, a dog might have bit you on the way to work. So you can only be so complete because you're still limping on that left leg. So, and showing up is not enough for me sometimes.
Yeah. It's interesting. When you said that, I was picturing, it's like when people are totally in their strengths and they just rise to the occasion, that, there's just this flow. It's beautiful. And if you said, what did you do? What made that work? It's like, oh, I was just being myself. Often people don't see their strengths. And I think this is often why we lack confidence, because when we're doing a great job, we're not seeing that. We're not feeling it. We just are feeling the lack of friction of, being incongruent or something.
I agree with you completely. And I'm going to pick up on that one at strengths. And I think we've got that a bit wrong. Now, I don't mean what we say is wrong or our intention is wrong. What I find is that our school systems have not really shown us what is a strength.
Yes.
So let me try to explain that as clearly as I can. So very often somebody sees you doing something and they go, man, Kerrie, you do that really, really well. And they say, that's your strength. And you go, no, I do this because I've always been told to do this. And I've just become very good at it because I've done 10,000 hours of it.
Yeah.
But I have no love in this. And
Yeah.
I think that is the subtle difference between when you're good at something and very good and excellent at something, if there's no love in it, it's not your strength. You do not have to be good at something for it to be your strength. So let me say that you've always loved drawing. You've always loved to see how you draw perspective, but you can't do it. But every time you sit down, and even if you draw your photo pictures with pencil and you think they're not the best, but you know what? I don't feel time. I feel absolutely relaxed. My heartbeat goes down. I have all these nostalgic feelings of my family and my past, and everything comes out.
Yeah.
But I'm not happy with what I've drawn here. But you have found love in what you do. And I think that is strength. Yes. It's finding love in what you do, but it's not what you love doing.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, because you can love doing it, and then I think sometimes we judge it harshly because of the expectations of others, because we're comparing ourselves to others, and then we can lose the joy of it. But I think to just appreciate that it does have value.
Yeah, you have just summed up something.
Yeah.
Oh no, you just touched something in my heart. You said comparing people.
Yeah.
I struggle. I struggle that we are still using external benchmarks to compare people. In any moment, if I have to evaluate you against an external benchmark to see how good you are, I'm only evaluating myself, number one. Secondly, and this is the thing which I do not understand, is why can't we separate two things? Why have we not understood the difference between temporal comparison and social comparison? Social comparison breaks people. So let me explain that one very, very simply. It's when my parents used to say to me, Imran, my son. And I go, yeah, Mum and Dad, how you doing? He goes, look, you know the son up the road? Yeah, I do know him. From Auntie. And I go, yeah. Well, he's such a wonderful man, and we'd like you to be more like him. That's social comparison. My parents could have said and asked me, Imran, how could you be a better son? And got me to reflect, but they compared me to somebody outside. And I sat there thinking, well, then why don't you hire him as your son? And I'll just go for a walk and not come back.
Yeah.
And then people then say, well, how do you expect humans to grow? And I go, well, temporal comparisons. It's when a human's allowed to compare themselves to themselves.
Yes.
It's when an environment, a space that gives you confidence to be able to look at yourself and see and work out who you are. And then what happens is people generally reply, yeah, but what if you're lying to yourself and you're just bigging yourself up? That's okay. Let them keep lying to themselves. It's okay. Because that's the power of temporal comparison. One day you will wake up in the mirror and realize that you are lying to yourself. But if the environment around you gives you that space to be, then reflection will kick in. Nature did not do a bad job in developing us. 300 million years, I think. Nature made us into we're the best learning machines ever. Sometimes we just got to get out. We just have to get out of the way.
Yes. Yeah, and taking that time to reflect, to be honest with ourselves, is so incredibly powerful.
That comes back to space again, isn't it? And how can
Yeah,
you speed that up? Well, if you create confidence in a space.
yeah,
That's how you speed up reflection. So why do I create space? It's because if I can get people feeling confident in a room, and that is directly linked to psychological safety, then what happens? It speeds up.
yes,
People start reflecting. They start getting, Imran, I can feel something. I don't want to have this thought, but okay, I'm going to have it. I'm going to
yeah,
express it. And then
yeah,
a tear falls out of their eye, or they have to get up and leave the room and come back in
yeah,
because they've suddenly felt something they've never felt before.
yeah. That's really powerful. And I was just actually going to bring up psychological safety. It's something that I first heard about in 2011. I was at the Neuro Leadership Summit in San Francisco. And as we unpacked that, it was in like a corporate space, and we're looking at, and I had my own experience. I just related. I was like, oh my word, I spent years of my life in a work environment of, where it really lacked psychological safety. So I just got it straight away. But this is something that you work in a lot too. And I was thinking it would be really valuable to hear your thoughts on how we create psychological safety for strangers. Because, I saw something just this week online. I think it was the guy who did videos called Conversations with a Black Man. Okay. And he said, there's a couple of different guys that I saw speaking up. And he said, he just mentioned that he sits in his car and waits for his neighbor to go inside before he, gets out of his car and comes home. Like he sees her because he doesn't want her to feel threatened. And I felt really sad that he would feel like that. But I thought he's, I guess in some ways you might say he's, being the bigger man, or, he's, I thought he's creating a sense of safety for her. And this is what we can do for strangers all the time. If we see that, even I don't think that I would be a threat to people, but I know that I can be if I just ask a question that maybe, puts them on their guard or something. And when we encounter strangers, we don't know what's on their mind. We don't know what they've just been going through. And so my innocent question might put their walls up. So I need to be very aware of creating that space. And I hadn't really made the connection of I'm creating a space of psychological safety in those momentary encounters with strangers. But we can. And I would really love to unpack this more with you so that we can be more aware, regardless of what culture people are from, because we don't know anyone's story when we're first encountering somebody on the street, in a conference, wherever. So tell me your thoughts on this.
You touched on a number of points where I need to correct people on science a little bit first.
Yeah.
So one of the things, this feeling of that I don't want to hurt somebody even before you've actually met them. I don't want to be an annoyance. I don't want to be, it's very Anglo-Saxon. I don't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
You see it in a normal daily conversation, look, do you want a cup of tea, Kerrie? And you go, I don't want to bother you, Imran, but if you are making one, do make me one. Do you want a cup of tea, Kerrie?
Yeah,
and you go, yes, I want a cup of tea. Yeah, exactly. You see that sort of behavior that happens when, exactly. So you can see that sort of, I don't want to be an inconvenience to somebody else. I think that's also a result of us not understanding something, that the human needs a stimulus and then it has to be a response.
Yes.
No, that's wrong. That science is wrong. You don't create a stimulus and the response happens. We don't construct emotions like that. Our body, nature is not linear in that way. We have something, you have a sense before you walk into a room or before you meet somebody.
Yeah.
Something happens. You feel your body change when you walk up to somebody. You can say, oh, here I feel safe. Or as you walk into somebody, you think, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be I don't know if this is going to work. That's even before the stimulus has started. That is what nature has created in us.
Yeah.
And it helps us to sense things before we walk in. You sometimes, I don't know how it is I'm just trying to guess how it is in Australia now, but say you're out in the wilderness and you have a sense that, hang on, this could have a snake underneath it, under this stone, be careful. Why can we sense that? There's no stimulus. What happens is the stimulus happens afterwards. You pick up the stone and there is a snake and you're all right. And then you run. And the snake has already realized as well. And I think that's the first thing to remember, is that you start listening to your body and yourself before you meet up. So you've got to know that person, no matter who you meet. You've got to be in touch with yourself before you go up to anybody and everybody in the room or in the street. And I think that is the first thing that I find that we keep forgetting when you walk up to somebody. The other part, and I've forgotten the other part now, but hopefully it will come back to me if I just carry on. So that for me is one of the key things. So when I do meet people, one of the things that I keep realizing that works is I'm really, really fascinated in what I can learn from them. So their uniqueness, I remind them of themselves. That's what I do. I know that in every conversation I've had, I know that the minute I walk away, I should have this feeling inside me that I've grown as a human and I've learned from this human.
Yeah.
And I think that is the thing, is helping a human feel unique in what they are. I'm tired of having every human who's an all-rounded, perfect individual. We can't produce them. We've created in organizations this concept of leadership, and everybody has to fit into this concept of leadership. So I'm getting every leader to fit into leadership, but we're not like that as human. I mean, put it into a very simple sentence, Kerrie. If I went away with you for a whole day, how would I come back as a human, and how would I have grown? What would I have learned from you? That is what you do. And how do you do that? And one of the things we do all the time is we ask people things like, what are your values? That is a really hard question to ask.
Yeah.
So make it a bit easier. Say, look, hey, what could I learn from you? Like, if I spent a day with you, why would I be a better person by the end of it? Yeah. And then they can start. I mean, there's still people look up, they look away, their eyes go all funny when they then suddenly have to talk about themselves, and you're surfacing raw emotion there, and you're reminding them who they are. And once people are reminded of who they are, you start realizing that the space fills up with confidence. And you just got to hold that.
Yeah, because it sounds like
that's one of the things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You're reminding people of their best self.
Well, I mean, yeah. So the word "best" there is very Anglo-Saxon for me.
Yeah, and how many languages do you speak?
Well, okay, I grew up on 4.
Yeah.
So I grew up on English, Hindi, Urdu, and Punjabi. Wow. And then I learned Spanish because I worked out in Spain for 4.5, 5 years, and then I learned German. So I'm hitting 6.5.
Wow. So I get that our English language is so limited, and sometimes when I'm coaching someone who is like, especially in emotional language, when I'm coaching somebody who's multilingual, then I might say, how are you feeling about this, whatever it is? And as I see them pause, I'm like, any language. Because sometimes you might need to say something that I don't need to understand it, but you do. And when you articulate what that is in your language, I mean, hopefully you can pretty much stick to English for this. I think we have English audience. But, if you feel like you just need to throw something out there.
There is. That there is something that I can say a German word. And I find it really hard to translate. I was talking about stimulus and response. What happens before a stimulus and response is in German called an Ahnung. You have an Ahnung of something. You sense it. You have a feeling that something is not right. Something is right, or something's great. You feel it inside. Your whole body starts vibrating. Your body tells you something, and you're listening to it. And some people call it intuition. Some call it, it's the what do you call it? The nerve that goes from here right down through your belly into your gut. Is it the vagal nerve or something?
Vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve, exactly. But all these things come up, but so Ahnung is the German word. So I find that word is a lot easier to say. That sentence is a lot easier to say in German than in English.
Yes, and so this is great. We've used a Japanese word, which is
a German
beautiful.
word.
And a German word. What will we cover by the time we get to the end of this conversation? And this is such a rich conversation. So one of the stunning things that I learned when I first connected with you, I'm not sure if it was Simon or if it was you that told me, you deliberately connect with strangers every week.
Yes.
How many... Yes. You actually give time to going out and connecting with strangers. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, exactly. So what happened about 14 years ago was I was tired of having sales numbers and being driven by metrics that were not indicators. They were targets, and targets create no learning. There's a very famous saying of like, when a measure becomes a target, it's not a measure anymore. And I'm a big fan of that. So I was thinking, well, how do I create something that helps me measure?
Mm-hmm.
And working with a mentor, because I've always had mentors and coaches in my life, she helped me and actually scared the hell out of me, because she then came up with this idea of saying, well, Imran, what if you met new people every week and you dedicated time to it? Like you dedicate to having 2-3 sales meetings per day, you have to meet new humans. And, the underlying thing is that it tests your empathy, it grows your network, and part of it is just about giving. You don't take, you give first. You help without any sort of intention of making money or monetizing it. And I thought, I could do that for a week. Then I said, hang on, but for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, hang on, every week. Hang on, this means I've got to be strategic. This means I've got to, wow. And then at that point, I got scared. And I put it in, and then she said, look, try. And then I started. It built my confidence a lot, because I was like, do they really want to speak to me? Will they find me annoying? All these English sort of things I'd been brought up with suddenly started pouring out of me. And I started realizing, but I'm not like that. And my family is not like that. We come from a family of just going out there and talking to people and talking to anybody and everybody. And where does this Englishness in me suddenly take root and take hold of me? And that's what started happening. And I started saying, okay, every week, 8 hours. It still is the same. It's 8 hours of my week needs to be spent with people I do not know. It cannot be a friend I have not seen for 20 years or somebody I know. It's got to be somebody completely and utterly new.
Awesome. So tell us
Every
where
week.
you find these people.
It goes through LinkedIn, as you said before, has been a great, great, great help. But what also happens, I read an article or somebody gives me, like last week, 2 weeks ago, my wife read a book called Ethical Design.
Yeah.
And in there was a chapter about something SAP have done around humanizing business. And the person behind it is a guy called Toby. And a woman behind Toby, who creates all the metrics, is his wife, called Natalie, or the genius, as he calls her.
Yeah.
And I just approached him. His name was there. I tweeted. I don't know how I did it, through either Twitter or something. He wrote back straight away and said, Imran, let's connect. This is interesting what you're doing.
Yeah.
I've looked at yourself, and we connected with his partner last week, and we had an hour and a half conversation. Great. And now we are going to be meeting again in 3 weeks to dig deeper. And that's how it happens. That's just one example. Yeah. Then what happens is I meet people in the dog zone where I go with my dog.
Yeah.
I take opportunities. Now, this week, something very, very special happened. Is the ex-Bundeskanzler of Austria, the guy who ran Austria, walked into the dog zone.
Wow.
The president, prime minister of the country walked into the dog zone with his dog. And he looked at me, and the first thing I said to him was, "Oh, so lovely to see you here." And he smiled and smiled back. And then our dogs were playing with each other. And I asked him a couple of questions about his dog. He asked me a few questions about his dog. And then I said to him, do you know what? As you were in office, as somebody who is European and cannot vote in this country, because I'm English, and you can't vote in a different country for the leading party.
Yeah.
We got into a conversation, and he said, "So what do you do?" And I just every time I said something, I tried to end. It's not I intentionally do it, but I always find myself ending the question with a way of getting the other, like it's a question, so they have to speak.
Yeah.
So I'm somehow dragging them in or pulling them in. I don't know I'm doing it, but I find people do it. And some other times, somebody, my daughter and my friends sometimes say, Imran, you hold the space and then you provoke them. That's how they define me sometimes. They go, do you mean I don't provoke? I go, yeah, but you provoke with empathy and compassion, they say. You don't provoke by wanting to hurt them, but you've got them in a safe space, and then you start provoking.
Yeah.
And I don't know I do that. And I think it's just after, so many years of doing it, you're realizing that provocation helps you move. And provocation with empathy and compassion helps humans change. And I know, then I looked into the research, and I dug deep, and I found that even within any sort of speaking therapy you go through, provocation is a tool that you have to use. But it can't hurt the human. If the place is safe, if you feel safe, then provocation will make you laugh. It will make you say, you work me out. I hate when people do that. But no, hang on, I've got to really reflect on that and work on that. Can I work with you, Kerrie, or can you work with me and help me work through this, what I'm doing to myself, where I sabotage myself in certain situations in my family or in my team, and I can grow and help others be successful and myself be successful. So, you move people. To come back to your question about what do I do? And I think I've been thinking a lot about very sort of empty words like deep listening. And I like the term deep listening. I like the term listening.
Yeah.
But I find it empty. Nobody knows how to do
it. Yeah.
And I've been looking for years to work out how to put content into this. And the way I currently do it is, what I've realized is, it is one thing, if you want to work out if you're listening well or listening deeply or listening at all.
Yeah.
Check in with your head and see if you're not trying to fix the other person. So are you listening to fix somebody? So somebody's talking at the same time your head is already fixing them or their situation. And if you are, stop it.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
So I didn't think, okay, so what do I need to listen? Do I need to listen to fix? Do I need to listen to understand, listen to care, listen to feel and hear the other person, listen to whatever you want to, but I think we don't do it well. I think most of us are going to be a bit like, looking at the Anglo-Saxon culture, we are, and sentences like the early bird gets the early worm.
Yeah.
We are very productivity focused. So it's all about fixing.
Yes.
Being pragmatic is for us just getting stuff done. But it's fascinating to see how that impacts human health, the health of the community, the health of a population. And if we don't move on from, well, how are we going to fix this? What's the solution? No, let's not see. People confuse things. Fixing things for the sake of fixing them with small fixes with a quick plaster is not a solution.
Yes. This past week or two, or all year really, there's just been so much noise and so much rage and borrowed outrage on the internet. And I just feel that we need to listen. We need to really develop our listening skills. And like you say, we're not good at it. And I've spent 16 years practicing it. As a coach, I think you realize, what am I listening for right now? Am I listening to say something clever, to ask a great question, to get somebody to an outcome, but just to listen with curiosity, openness, empathy. It really does mean that we also have to listen to ourselves and hear what's coming up, so that we can let go of it and fully be in the moment.
And it's not prescriptive.
Yes.
You won't be able to, and it's always been told to me, my sales courses or my sales seminars, is something prescriptive. This is how you listen properly.
Yes.
No, you don't. Not if you think you're better than the person in front of you. Oh. And how can you work that out? It's very, very simple. And for me, this is one of the biggest problems I have with the word praise. And I think people are going to give me a hard time on this one, because I think praise is in line with pride and punishment. They all belong together. Mm-hmm. So if I praise somebody, that means that I've already done it before and I've done it better than you. Mm-hmm. And you're getting there slowly. You're reaching my level of maturity slowly, Kerrie, because I'm praising you now. But if you don't get it right, I will punish you. And I would say, well, what is the thing that you need to do to create relationships so we see eye to eye? No, we don't. We sit here and we're eye to eye. We're equals in the room. Doesn't matter if I carry 26 years of experience and you only 2. What I do know today in the complex world is my experience is not going to help us create solutions of the future, because we've never been here before. Mm. So what is it? And I keep pushing people, and they sit there going, "Oh, well, if I'm praising somebody, I'm just complimenting somebody." No, you're not. Mm. You're setting the position, and you're telling them where you belong. Mm. And you're saying that they belong below you through your words. And they go, yeah, but they struggle. Yeah, but what am I supposed to do? I says, encourage people.
Yes.
Encouragement builds relationships.
I love this.
Very simple.
You're asking yourself the questions that I'm going to ask you.
So you can see how aligned we are.
I'm just sitting here and just watching this Q&A play out with what you're sharing, because I can hear people just going, but what do I do if I don't praise people? And there it is. You encourage, which puts courage in, and I've seen acknowledgement be something of a learning point, like for both of us. So when I see the way that you engage with people, and I acknowledge that and say, Imran, I love how you listen and how you pose ideas without judgment of or assumption about how it will land. You're just offering it. And so I can acknowledge that, not to just go, oh, you're so clever, but to say, thank you for that. I see that, and that's helpful. And so it's learning for me, but also I think it can be learning for you too, because when people acknowledge us for something or they encourage us, we can learn from that. Because again, back to 20 minutes ago, you said that people don't see when they're in that zone of really being, what was the word? And then I said, strengths or in flow.
Yeah.
You don't see it. So when somebody can observe it and just go, what you just said there or created, that was magnificent.
That's it. It's exactly that. And then you can add something else on top of it. So you can keep adding things on it. And over the years, things have been adding. So I'm going to add another. So and then you can observe whether the conversation is spiraling upwards, or you can observe the conversation spiraling downwards, can't you?
Yes.
Or it's just spiraling in a circle. And you think, this is not going to move on. We're going to continue talking about the weather for the next 20 minutes, and I am going to leave, and this person's going to leave. And you know what? We're going to be happy for it. And that also happens. So don't get me wrong, but the interesting thing is, I always looked at the fuel that drives us upwards.
Yes.
The interesting thing is, I've been looking at what drives a conversation upwards, and it's vulnerability. It's always how vulnerable you are in the situation.
Yes.
If I in the conversation share something with you and go, look, Kerrie, I'm going to share with you, I don't think I can feel how you're feeling, but I lived with a father for over 40, 50 years who's been suicidal, manic depressive, and how many times did I have to save him from hurting himself?
Yeah.
And then I open up a touch. I show them that I struggled as a human. I've been through a phase. I haven't been through what my father's been through, and I have not been through what you've been through. But I'm trying to empathize. I'm showing my vulnerability of, I could never, ever, ever understand, ever in my life, understand what somebody who's got any form of anxiety, any form of depression goes through. I've only had to live with somebody who has been my father. I've had friends, but I've never had it. But and that helps the conversation to go up, because what you're saying through this vulnerability is, look, I'm going to let down my guard a little bit, because here I feel I can open up a touch, and I want to fuel this conversation, but I want to fuel it in the right direction, because through that, in what I've just said, is the encouragement, and it's hidden then.
Yes.
It's hidden, isn't it, for the person opposite, for the person I'm talking to on the receiving side, because they suddenly feel encouraged in being able to say, maybe with Imran I can go further than the standard conversation after the second glass of wine I generally have in the pub and just met this person.
Yes. Yep. No wine in this conversation, for anyone who's wondering.
I don't know.
It's early hours of the morning for you, isn't it? And
yeah, exactly. No, I'm still on my herbal tea.
yeah. And I've got my evening herbal tea.
Brilliant. So we're at the opposite ends of the spectrum in the most beautiful way.
Yeah. So I'm wondering about, I'd love to hear more of your stories. And this podcast is going longer than my usual ones, but I just thought, let's just have this conversation that maybe people are walking with us right now, or maybe they're just sitting on the lounge and, pressing stop and start every second day or something. But you have so many extraordinary stories, and I would love to hear more about the strangers that you've been meeting and how that empathy has connected with them and lifted them. What have you noticed?
A number of things. It goes in all different directions. Sometimes it leads to me ending up going do some shopping, and we go and grill something together.
Yeah.
We when we end up having an evening, and then my partner joins me, or something happens. It leads on.
Yeah.
Sometimes the strangest things happen. I don't realize I've been in the toilet for an hour because I've just had a chat with somebody while we're washing our hands. My daughter has to come into the bathroom and says, "I guess right, you've met somebody, Dad." And we're laughing. I'm laughing, saying, "I'm so sorry." My daughter says, "I come to have lunch with you and the family," and I've ended up having a conversation in the men's toilets. It happens on the plane. I think one of a very special conversation I had on the flying to New York. next to me, I had a very large gentleman, very well built. And I was like looking and thinking, God, you could be an elite soldier. And he was
Oh,
a
wow.
retired elite soldier.
Good pickup.
And he never had, afterwards he said, "Imran, I've never ever," and he's not allowed to, obviously he's under, he can't talk about what he does.
Yeah.
But he says, "I've never had a conversation about what I, as a team lead within the Navy SEALs, over 200 missions, had to do from an empathy point of view." And we touched heart, and it was really, really, really a powerful, 8 hours flight.
Wow.
We did not stop. It keeps going. Then I've got work through it.
Can I just pause on that?
It just never stops.
Yeah. So as you share that story, I remember being on a flight from Dubbo to Sydney, where I live, and I live in Dubbo, flying to Sydney,
Yeah.
and I chatted with this woman on the flight, and she was going to the theatre, etc., and she asked what I was doing, and this is probably half an hour into the 1 hour flight, and I think I said, I'm doing something, speaking about my latest book, and she's like, "Oh, what is that?" And sometimes I just hold up the business card that has the book on it, and and people just go, "Oh, do you talk to strangers?" And then they start laughing because they're like, "This is what's happening. This is what we're doing." And she said, "Oh, I don't usually talk to strangers." No, she did. She just said, "I don't talk to strangers." And I said, "And yet we've just had a wonderful conversation." And she said, "Oh, but that's different." And I said, what's different? Because I'm wanting to learn. What is the experience that people are having when they have this great conversation with me? Tell me they don't talk to strangers, and yet I was a stranger like 20 minutes ago. And she said, "Well, you didn't ask the usual questions. You didn't say, 'What do you do?'" And she said, "I hated going to parties because people would say, 'What do you do?' And I just would say, 'Oh, I work in an office.'" Because her job was one in the legal profession where if she talked about what she did, the stuff that she could actually talk about, then people would start pulling out their stories of all their legal cases and everything. And, everyone's got a cousin who had a mistrial or something. And it's just not a fun party conversation. And so when you connect with a Navy SEAL on a flight, they can't talk about their job. There's things that they just cannot discuss. And so they just think a stranger's just going to ask all these questions and I can't go there and I'm not inspired to go there. But when you start having a meaningful conversation, they are so grateful. Yeah. He obviously was so...
This is one of the... I once went to a lecture where it was a psychologist who works with people... who's worked with people like who have been serial killers, who have, they've gone through people who've killed other people, and one of the things the reason I wanted to go along to this session was I'm always fascinated by, in extreme situations, whether it's in a hospital where people are wheeled into a room where a group of people save their lives and stabilize them so they can go to the intensive care unit, elite soldiers who, whether you're a pacifist or not, it's an extreme situation. People who work with people who have done wrong in our society, or have been whatever. It's always extreme situations. And this guy really got me because his opening line was, "Okay, you're sitting in front of a serial killer." And first of all, the picture in my head was already sitting in front of a serial killer. Okay, you looked at people next to you who you do not know. And you think, "Okay, you're a serial killer now." And then he says, "Okay, start a conversation."
Right.
What's the first thing you say? What is the thing that you will do? And obviously what through my head was, God, I can't talk to a serial killer. What's wrong with you, Imran? It's like, I had all these I had more conversations with myself that I could actually get to the point. And then really the sense of relief came when he just said, "Look, all I do is I find a common ground."
Yeah.
And I sense, I say something, it's not about the weather. I say something that will give us a common ground to speak on, and we engage. And I think that's it. It's, if you sit there for a while and before blurting open your mouth and saying, and you start talking about yourself, you sense and you think, hang on, this person doesn't want to speak.
Yeah.
And then what you might say is, and if you allow your body and you allow the space and you just sit there for a while and you think, okay, I think I'm going to say something now. And when you do say something, what comes out is something which they've listened to and they go, I didn't expect that from you. I expected, hello, what do you do?
Yeah.
Where are you going?
Yeah. We need to be comfortable with silence. And of course, we try not to have too much silence on a podcast, because then people are like, is it still playing? What's happening?
Exactly.
But, like when you're talking about sitting down with somebody and just sensing the moment, that again, it's coming back to being okay with awkward, because we rush to fill the space, don't we? We're afraid of a moment of silence, but just to take a moment. And I think this is something, because I would like to wrap up with some practical tips for people. Like, how can we, create a safer space for people to connect in? When we do encounter people on the street, then how do we connect?
Okay, I've got something. Do you know what I do more and more? Do you know what I do more and more at the moment?
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at the current context of Corona as well, and bring that in here, because I think this is super hands-on and very, very practical, and you can play with your words and apply it to the way you use your language and how you yourself like to connect with people. And what I found is I've been looking at helping surface the emotions we're currently having. Because, I'm going to segment people into 3 categories, and I don't want to offend anybody in any of them. Is that, there's people who the current situation frightens them. It puts them in, it brings out all the anxieties of the future and everything, and it does a lot to them, and they feel it, and they sense every little thing that everybody does outside.
Yeah.
And they struggle with themselves when they see themselves policing other people. Yeah. Because they're saying, why are they doing that? Why are they being so stupid? But you realize that at the core of it is some form of fear. Then there's the ones who trod along, could be super easygoing and pragmatic, and just get on with it and deal with it. And there's the others group where after 2 weeks, they can't stand being inside. The walls are closing in on them. The whole system seems to think, God, I need to get out and meet people and hug people and touch people.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and what I find super practical is, like, think of it like this. I'm going to actually talk about 4 things. And as I go through the 4 things, number 1 is the easiest. Number 4 is a very deep conversation. So the first thing is ask people about their uncertainties. Say, look, what uncertainties are you carrying currently? Begin with something very simple. Yeah. Surface it and share yours. Share your uncertainty and they'll share theirs.
Yeah.
And what that does, uncertainty brings, is trying to get an understanding of the current situation. So uncertainty is the search for understanding, isn't it? That's what you're doing. So and you don't need to show so much vulnerability there. Then the next one is about worry. Ask people, like, what are you worrying about? Because worry is one of those things that we all have, but it's a bit more than uncertainty, isn't it? You can already feel yourself, your body, like going, if I have to talk about my worries, can I? Do I have to speak? Do I have to be careful about what I say?
Yeah.
And if you can get to that point, then take it a step further and see if you can talk about what the person currently fears.
Yeah.
Because what you're getting into is the space of anxiety now. You're getting into the space of, look, if I have to open up about what is painful for me, then I've got to talk about my fears. So you're already pretty deep there. And there is a level deeper you could also go. And you could say, well, look, hang on, I feel really comfortable with you. What are you thinking but not saying about the situation? And then go silent.
Yeah.
And then you could go even deeper. But the thing is, the whole idea behind this is that if it's also you're putting yourself into a situation where you're saying, look, if I ask you that question, I've got to be able to share that as well.
Exactly.
Do you see what I mean? And so it's just and with the current situation, if you do it with children, you'll find children are amazing. If you do it with young people, they're amazing as well. And adults struggle a bit more because the frontal lobe controls them a little bit more. And they feel, if I open up, are they going to use this against me?
Yes.
But do it with your team, do it with anybody, but wrap it in empathy and compassion. Wrap it in making sure, is this the right space? Is this the right time?
Yes.
And you'll find something like that can be super, super helpful at the moment, just to surface them. And then the next step comes, well, how do you want to structure that data? So you've got this data now. And if you want to structure that data, try to pull out just the encouraging data and apply it. You don't have to now pick up what's relevant to your conversation and fuel the conversation with encouragement. And then you've got what they call, in another word, appreciative inquiry, if people ever heard of that.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing in appreciative inquiry, because you get people to talk about the best moments. But when you ask them directly, most people struggle with best moments because they have to, the way we're set up, we record bad moments better. Our brain cannot record good moments well because bad moments is what protects us.
Yeah, it's interesting because I often, encourage people to ask questions around, what's your favorite or what's your best? Because if you ask somebody like, what's the best cafe around here, they're so happy to share. It can be a good little connector. But to have these conversations with empathy, I have to underline that empathy and compassion, because sometimes people want to take a tip, or they want to take your questions and go, okay, Imran gave us some great questions, I'm going to try those out today with a stranger. Well, if you don't bring that empathy and compassion at the heart of it, then it's going to just get messy.
No, try it. Don't be, but that's why I like the whole thing about start with uncertainty. Do it anyway. Make mistakes.
Yes.
Fall into it. I mean, it's not that I have never offended anybody. It's not. I mean, I can think of a gentleman I really offended, and then I was lucky enough to because we were on the same platform in London. I went up to him the next day and apologized. And he says, and we had and then we saw each other every day, and we kept on saying hello. And then at one point, it took a month later, we talked about that situation. And sometimes things just don't work out. It's okay, but very often the thing you have to always remember is when you walk away and a conversation hasn't worked, is I've never ever I've looked at myself. I've looked at what happened to me. Was I being arrogant? Was I full on myself? Very often it has to do with my own arrogance and my own ignorance of not understanding what somebody else is going through, and struggling as well in my head because I grew up in a culture where, in a school system where people would if you did something wrong, they would ask you, "What's wrong with you then?
Right.
What's wrong with you?" Rather than asking the question, "What happened to you?"
Yeah.
That everybody out there is doing the best they can in the moment, in the second they are on the street.
Yeah, thank you. I love a conversation with you. We make assumptions. Like, we need to know, to be aware that we make assumptions, we have bias. But if we're going to make an assumption, let's make a better one. And that is a really powerful assumption to work from, that everyone's doing the best they can. It gives us grace for ourselves, and it gives us grace for others. And, I really love so many of the things that we've meandered through today. I mean, we started this conversation before recording, talking about, the nature, going for long walks, and I was glad to do that today. But I feel like that's what we've done this afternoon.
Thank you, Kerrie. It's been lovely. Thank you for your questions. I'm awake now. I realize I don't need a coffee anymore. My head's like buzzing now. So I'm going to take the dog for a walk now, and my head's buzzing. So thank you. It's been so kind that it's worked, from, amazing technology, how it works. You're on the other side of the world. I'm on this side of the world, and this works. This is amazing.
Yes. Well, feel free to send me any photos from your walk in Vienna, and tell me.
I'll find a ceiling for you. I'll see, because I am a big fan of ceilings as well. So I'll see if I can find one and send you one. I like the Art Deco ones in Vienna when you find them.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure you've got so much beautiful artwork there that I've never seen.
But
I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, do tell me if you meet some great strangers in the next 24 hours.
I will do.
I'm sure you'll meet some really great people out there. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
We'll talk again soon. Thanks, Imran.
Take care. Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.